is it no thing?
Well, it's we're back. Last time it took me forever, but I finally posted. Did you see I posted our
I,
first discussion?
I did. It was a placeholder, and it's
Yeah,
been so busy. I've not had a
like a
chance to
rerun.
go back and take a peek. Probably should
Well,
for
it's
posterity's sake.
it's it's all right. It's long, but let's hit the intro.
This is not a show. It might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and guest.
So, one of the things I want to talk about today. So, if today were an article, it's good to have you back, man. It's good to talk to you.
It's
again.
good to be back.
I missed last week.
I did too. I was just under the gun on some things, and I hated the bail. I was like, I got a bail.
Nah, it's fine. We got to bail every now. We got to take a break every now. We're human.
Yeah.
You are a free man now. Hey, you are on your own.
I'm a free agent, so to speak, or
Free agent.
semi-free agent, a partially free agent.
Is anyone really a free agent?
A free agent, right? Is even becoming a free agent the goal?
Well, I wanted to talk today about silence. I actually wanted to talk about an article I read about. It's called Non-Time. I think it's called Non-Time, and I was like, no, because that will get us talking about time. But what non-time was they were talking about Einstein and some of the greatest thinkers of the modern time of the modern ages. In order to stay highly productive and highly creative, take time to not do anything. And just take in silence. I didn't read the whole article, but I assume silence is a big part of that. And it just struck me. Hey, Aunt Joe. Hey, Aunt Joe. Judah, I've missed you. Love you, Aunt Joe. I love you too, Aunt Joe. Glad you're watching. But so silence, what is your experience with silence? Have you found that it helps you be more productive and more creative?
Creative would be the word I would probably go to quickest.
Really?
Yeah, and maybe it would also depend on how I wanted to talk about productivity.
Yeah,
like there's the volume of like what one produces, and then there's the quality of what one produces, and those can be different things. But I'm trying to scrap my memory here because I think I read something very similar, and the ideally for solid creative work, there you have to have some downtime. You have to have some silent time. Because normally the better ideas I get are like in the quiet in the morning, or going like while taking a walk, or while driving. I think it's been a pretty consistent, time to let my mind just grind on some issues and work through some things and come up with a solution or an idea, or even just simply some level of acceptance. So I would concur.
Well, I thought about you because in youth group, the group I lead, and Chan and I lead, and Pastor Dave, but we have a time of silence, and I at this point I'm having them hold their breath, and we say for 30 seconds, but I think it ends up being like 10. But we call it the simultaneous sigh. And so two things I think are incredibly important for sanity and peace and that is silence and deep breathing. But the silence part, I'm always amazed at how pleasurable silence is. You know, like it's like one of those things that until you start noticing it, until I start noticing it, I don't realize how much I yearn for it. But the reason I thought of you is because we do some mindfulness. We're in my last youth group, we did more mindfulness stuff where we talked more about stepping back and just not trying to not think, but to look at what we're thinking about. And Chand is always afraid that parents are going to get freaked out. You know, it's like too new agey. I'm like, I guess. But I always talk about being able to like give, be still and know that I am God. Like to give space for God to speak, to be with us, and not and to let him give us some order and peace. I don't know.
Well,
You have a lot more experience with that sort of approach
I don't
to no
maybe sort of beginner, lifelong beginner. No, we live in a hectic culture. We live in a loud culture. It's fascinating to me listening to you talk about your relationship with silence, so to speak, and
science.
Silence.
Oh, silence. Yeah.
Your relationship with silence. Like I love silence. Like I can't wait to get me some silence.
Yeah.
And I have a deep appreciation for silence, and I know of a lot of people that is not their experience with silence. They're very quick to fill it with a podcast, with a song, with media. And I mean, I think there's times where maybe I'll push away from some silence, but in general, no, I'm pretty comfortable with it. And yeah, sometimes darn near yearn for it. Yeah, we live in a really loud culture, and I guess in my mind, it's difficult. I don't. It's a rare thing when I think we actually experience true like quiet, when there isn't something that could distract us, or that the sheer volume or number of sounds around us are really low and in the background, truly in the background. And it takes practice to push. I shouldn't even say push, but allow those sounds to be out there. And yeah, it takes practice to explore your own mental landscape.
And it can be scary, right? Like,
well, I think we're
scary. Stuck with ourselves in those moments.
Well, sure, it's scary if it's unexplored territory, or the things that you find there you've not really accepted or integrated or dealt with or faced, faced, acknowledged. Just recognize that there are things there on the inside that aren't as beautiful as maybe we want them to be, aren't as developed or refined, maybe are just downright ugly or scary or frightening or sad or. On we go.
Well, but there's also I remember the person who opened my eyes to this is Dr. Wetmore. We've talked about him before, a fellow, a teacher of both of us, of ours, right? And he mentioned that he brought up the aspect of pleasure and how pleasure is not sin, but epithemia. He would talk about the Greek version of it, being, I forget what the verse he was focusing on, but sinful pleasure, and how, well, he would say just pleasure, and how sometimes translations like the NIV puts in sinful pleasure, where it's a distraction more than a sin, and how it quickly becomes sin as we get obsessed with it. He was talking about Christians who will, all of us, him himself, he talked about his struggle. And I can talk about my struggle with wanting to constantly listen to music. I remember growing up in high school, using that line, I can't do homework unless I'm listening to music. And it's like needing this constant, and he talked about it as like this constant pleasure, a soothing of some, inner something.
For sure.
And I thought, wow, it's true. But and I'm also talking about how silence can be pleasurable. So
it can, but it's. I wonder if silence is ever the kind of pleasure that
indulgence.
An indulgence or a distraction. Some a behavior that's self-soothing, or when I think of some things that we experience or do, like or just sensation seeking, like music, it can stir up certain kinds of sensations and emotions. Food, other activities. I mean, it's like, why are exports so exciting? Because they're exciting. They're adrenaline filled. And Dr. Whitmore. Yeah, no, it's true. A lot of problems with the pleasures isn't the pleasures themselves, but that we get so enamored with them.
Yeah. Hyper focused.
Yeah, we lose focus. They're a distraction. They're not bad. They're just not what's best.
That's an interesting thought. Can silence be something that we use for self-pleasure, pleasuring, or is it intrinsically and ultimately impossible, since it is a lack thereof rather than a it's not a stimulation, it's by definition the opposite of a stimulation.
Well, I mean, it's I don't know. I'm thinking through it. It's stimulating in some respects, but maybe it just it's a little less dangerous, I guess. I mean, I could see one getting. Maybe I could get wrapped up in my own thoughts, or become so self-focused. To lose sight of God and lose sight of my neighbor. Yeah. I suppose I've never been wrapped up in that bit of my life has never really been structured to where I guess I could abuse silence much.
Well, what comes to my mind are those that hyper focus onto, or perseverate on getting their meditation in, right? And sort of the idol of meditation, right? That could be a thing.
Well, that could, I could see that being a thing. I can't speak to it because I don't think I've ever quite experienced that. It and ultimately, like a lot of things, it's never an end in itself.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if silence can really, or the use of silence, the practice of silence, when it becomes an end in of itself. What are the results of that?
I mean, is it even possible? Is pure silence even possible? I mean, where it's impossible to not think, right?
Well, that's why I kind of want to make a distinction, like between quiet and silence.
Yeah, I think that's a good.
Like the exterior environment around me, it's a very artificial environment. Yeah. For it to be utterly quiet, and I think they have done some studies about that. Like, our bodies are so attuned to some level of outside sound that like if you go and sit inside a truly soundproof room, it doesn't take very long before you start to go a little wonky. Um, but silence as far as like not talking, right? And like holding our tongue and or even and maybe the kissing cousin of silence being solitude, where we are by ourselves.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
you know, there's something for being alone and being silent, being practicing being quiet. Maybe would be one way to say it.
Well, here's a question I have for you. You may be a little biased,
Odds are good.
but can we? Does it still work? This non-time that we're talking about? Does the stillness and silence still work if we're doing something that is self-soothing, like smoking? Because often, like I've thought about times to be alone or silent, and yet I've also thought, well, that'd be a good time to smoke my pipe,
Yeah.
So does that defeat the purpose, or are there sort of times to and times you shouldn't? Like just the moderation aspect. Because I always feel like there's something about tobacco in particular that, but see, maybe this is a stimulus, that we shouldn't crutch, but that helps the thought process, organized thought process. I don't know, but
I can't remember. It's been a while since I looked at what research had been done on that. And I want to say, if I remember correctly, and I'm probably not, that there actually really isn't a correlation between like tobacco use and like higher cognitive faculties,
right.
Unless one had already kind of acclimated themselves to the regular use of tobacco as a substance.
Yeah. So like the physical dependence aspect of it.
Yeah. Same thing with coffee.
That's another.
It's a very similar, like within very like moderate amounts. When you haven't become rather dependent to that stimulant, actually can have some cognitive enhancing qualities. Just like, let's say, something a little bit more synthetic like Adderall, which will really get you focused.
And dependent.
And if you have a steady supply of it, will get you dependent. That's a difficult one. The use of substances in combination with silence and solitude. I would just caution everyone to approach those things in moderation. I don't particularly think that they have any necessary benefit. I guess in my own life, where like I'm sort of a habitual pipe smoker. The only benefit that I can think of is the fact that I've created, along with this habit, is a bit of a ritual. Like and there's certain times of the day that I'll stop for 5-10 minutes, and the pipe is a little bit. It's more of a ritual because it's like I have to clean the pipe. I've got to grab some pipe tobacco. I need to break it up. Like, most of the stuff I smoke is what they call flaked tobacco. So I've got to break it up and let it air out a little bit. Then I got to pack the pipe. Then I got to light the pipe and let it burn down to just a little bit of ash. And then tamp it one more time and light it again. So it does provide a quiet. It's a place. It's a ritual of sorts where I am silent, and I often use that time to think about whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But could I certainly drop? I could reinvent that whole time if I wanted to. That in such a way that it involved no tobacco and it didn't involve a pipe, and maybe it just simply involved sitting outside for 5 to 10 minutes.
Well, what do you think it's so hard? I mean, I guess it's an easy question to answer, but maybe I just have never really asked the question: why is it so hard to just sit and do nothing? For an intentional, not sleep, not just to sit and do nothing. Does it have something to do with what you were talking about earlier? Is like dealing with the things we haven't faced on the inside?
Well, I think we may have to pull in just as an example for conversation's sake. It's been a while since I think I've heard you mention it, and it's been a while since I've watched it. But for a while, a very interesting survival show to watch is Alone.
Alone, yeah.
Because I think we talked about
we talked about it on our first.
Did we?
The first time we ever talked, yeah. That's
sweet.
when we talked about it.
I mean, just the fact that, in my opinion, the thing that breaks people down isn't the fact that they're hungry, isn't the fact that they're even alone necessarily. It's their thoughts. And you could watch grown men break down over the course of days or weeks based on what was going on in their own mind. And the ones that lasted longest were the ones that just for some reason were, I don't know, more at home with themselves. And they certainly missed their loved ones, their children, their wives, their friends. But I don't know. My big takeaway was always like, this person seems really at home with himself.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. Being able to be comfortable with yourself
in your own skin, like in your own mind, and even like having some more expanded and creative ways of dealing with oneself, like being able to talk to yourself or about yourself in the third person, and just sing and recite poems and whatever. Yeah, it's not something I've really dug into to find out. I'm kind of curious now. How many people are very comfortable with silence?
Well, so I have worked with with a certain population of young men that are on the spectrum, and it's amazing how. So I remember this one situation where I was, first getting to know my getting to know my what's it called, my not student, my client, and it's weird, but what was it, we were walking and I said, how are you with silence? And he said, I'm very comfortable. Almost like he wanted me to be silent right then, and I realized
I'm so comfortable
because
you're messing it up.
I was asking a lot of questions, of course, And that's one of the things I had to learn early on as a counselor was silence. Being able to, because I am somebody, maybe as you've experienced it, it's that I often need to fill silence with, I like to talk, I like to ask questions, I like to listen to people talk. Silence, one, I felt like in counseling sessions, like if there was silence, it's wasting their time, right? Or wasting their money or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And two, then I started worrying that they were judging my abilities, right? The insecurity, it's funny how quickly insecurity comes in when there's silence. Of course, I learned, it took some supervision and teaching, from my supervisors and teachers to point out how valuable silence can be in a counseling session or in any kind of relationship.
Words can mess it up. Yeah. Sometimes.
But on a podcast, we have to talk.
Yeah, we got to talk. Yeah, word due season. No, I'm a big fan of the silence.
Tell me about that.
I don't know. I mean, I don't feel the need to necessarily fill the air. Um, and I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that I can, most of the time, you can wait somebody out. Because and that goes back to the question of like how many other people are comfortable with silence, and if they're not comfortable with silence, they'll fill it,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll tend to fill it with something possibly that's important to them,
or the salient in the moment, right?
Or it's salient in the moment.
I think that right there is probably one of the most valuable things in an important discussion, and that is being able. So often, as a counselor, I want to help and give answers when the answers have to come from the identified client or patient, the person that's having the problems has to come up with solutions, right? If I give the solutions, it's not how it works best. And so maybe that's the most powerful tool in doing that is waiting them out.
I like it. I'm just trying to think of what other things that it communicates.
Mm-hmm.
When it's kind of like leaving the floor open. I don't know. It's almost. I'm trying to think. It's almost like a hat tip or a head nod to, letting that person be in control. Because even the questions that we use, can guide. They can move
Mm-hmm.
The conversation in a particular direction. That's inevitable. They're always going to be. It's always going to be some amount of guiding going on, even if it's very subtle.
Does that speak? Go ahead.
And it just allows people to do it in their own timing. Depending, I mean, it depends on the circumstances, but I don't know. For me, there's an aspect of respect. It also will slows down the pace of a conversation.
True.
And that allows things to get a lot more emotional. Potentially.
In other words, real. right? I feel like
I-
sometimes a crutch of conversation can be a pace. Filling space with words can be something to distract us,
it,
as we've talked about.
it can lead that way. I guess it's more, I think of it more as like full bodied, more fully orbed. Because yeah, we can get lost in our heads, and it's not to say that those things are unreal, or unuseful. It's just that there's more. There's more. Um, there's more information. There's more, um, that can be gained from involving the whole of our body, because that's ultimately where those emotions are showing up. Um, in our stomachs, in our shoulders, in our hands, in our feet, in our throat, in our chest, in our neck, in our back. Like those sensations, like that's where it's involving a lot more of our bodies
Mm-hmm.
in the moment. And yeah, it's easy to kind of breeze past that when the pace is just back and forth and back and forth, like a tennis match. They're just lobbing words back and forth, but you slow the pace down, it takes it takes on a different flavor, a different mode.
Would you say that that silence creates more honesty?
Hmm. Um, I wish that was true.
Hmm.
Um, I think the difficult thing about honesty is that, um, we as human beings have this propensity for self-deception, and
Yeah.
if and if the source is tainted, then pretty much everything else kinds of get a little tainted too. Um,
That's true. And,
so I
and
hope. I mean, it'd be nice.
I
We
mean,
all work
I
before we
guess
die.
I feel like there's a certain aspect of being silent that I guess it made me think of it when you talked about emotions being more present, full bodied presence. It made me think like there is a certain honesty that, or a certain reality that comes up in silence that we can't hide as well. Now, I think there's also an opportunity for the clever and the sly and those that know that to manipulate that.
Well, sure. Um, I guess there's always that possibility, but no, when you're involved in a conversation that's slowed down, and there
Mhm.
is room for silence, and in silence, I think is what's cool about it in the midst of a conversation, um, which is different than like silence as we experience with ourselves. That becomes an opportunity, oftentimes, to observe, right?
That's key. Yeah.
And so when going back to your bringing up honesty, the cool thing about that, and I'm just thinking as as somebody on the other side, right? Like of the room, of from I sit on the other side of the couch most of the time.
Yeah.
Um, when you're observing, but I do this with everybody. When you're observing the body, other people's bodies rarely lie. They
Yeah.
rarely lie. Um, for someone to be, deceptive with their body language is like master ninja level stuff that you rarely encounter. And the difficult thing though about body language is it's ambiguous oftentimes.
Mhm.
So even though somebody's not lying, it's not always interpreted, accurately. So you get impressions,
Right.
but that's why you end up having to follow up with words. I mean, there's only a handful of gestures and like facial, expressions that are like solid tells. Like
Right. Well, the body gives messages, but they're ambiguous. But I think mostly they're vague. Right. It's like
they can be,
I
yeah,
have an idea of what you're saying with your
mhm.
body right now, but
They're vague, but they're honest. they're honest.
To this
You
show.
know, you watch somebody and be like, "Are you doing okay?" "Oh, I'm fine." No, 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 no. You know, it's like your words say one thing, but your body doesn't. You're not acting like you're fine. You're not relaxed. You know,
Mm.
you're jittery. You know, like you keep shifting in your chair. You're having difficulty, you know, maintaining any kind of eye contact. Maybe they're sweating. You know, there's all kinds of things. You're like, yeah, I don't think you're okay.
Yeah.
But it's very easy to be like, no, I'm all right.
Right.
You know, I don't. I'm not getting that vibe. um, and that kind of incongruence, and like even that incongruence is another form of communication about, you know, conflict and um, you know, it's just. But no, the body never lies. Rarely, and it certainly doesn't lie to ourselves.
I think there is another aspect of what is the word? Kind and attentive. You know, that unconditional Rogerian silence. You know, like I'm here to listen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to talk, and you don't have to talk. I'm just here for you right now. You know that I'm here unconditionally for you right now. That is hard for someone to say I'm fine, right? It's like I'm fine. Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, I mean, we never leave it alone, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess the hard thing is it's like unconditional positive regard. Like I'm gonna think the best of you no matter what. Um, but there are conditions. Like I'm getting paid, right? And this is gonna end in about 50 minutes. Does 50 minutes sound
Well,
about right?
that's not a condition though. That's a limitation.
It's a limitation, a
It's a
boundary.
boundary.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't pay me, I'm not. No, I'm going to think the best of you as I escort you out of my office. Um,
Well, I guess I wasn't really
but no,
talking as much about the
I know what you're
positive
saying.
regard, but
But no, when people encounter that type of attention,
yeah.
that kind of presence, it and even in the context of silence, they will tend to drop their defenses.
Mm-hmm.
They will tend to open up. Um, when we just encounter somebody that's not coming at us with some agenda, like, you know, the therapeutic role is literally just to be in that person's presence for their best interest. That does tend to create its own opportunities,
Yeah.
and that's what makes it a little bit different than other forms of conversation. But on the other hand, I'm not sure if all that happened was in a therapeutic session was absolute silence, that the person would come back. Um,
Hmm.
and that's this kind of thing I'm just sitting here thinking of, like, it's going back to solitude, like
Mm-hmm.
where I tend to practice solitude, practice silence, you know, in the context of solitude, like by myself, outside by myself,
Interesting. That's a
driving
good
in my
point.
car by myself, going for a walk by myself, going for a hike by myself.
Social silence.
Yeah, I mean, the only social silence I can think of are moments of silence,
Yeah.
wherever that came from. That's something I would be interested to know more about as I say it.
Yeah.
You know, other than, you know, certain forms of Eastern meditation that are truly silent, that are done in groups.
We have very little social silence in our society today. Right?
Libraries.
Well, not even libraries anymore.
Yeah, maybe not anymore.
It used to be the library was nowadays,
Yeah,
man.
it was a place of silence. Hmm. Hmm.
What if we're missing out on some kind of regenerative um force of the Holy Spirit, that works within between us when we're silent together.
You, I don't know much. I forgot you're over there in North Carolina with all those Quakers.
Hmm.
Historically, there's a lot of Quakers over in North Carolina.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I can't remember what. I think there is a good bit of silence as a practice
Together.
amongst Quakers and together. Maybe
Hmm.
I don't. I'm searching my memory, and I'm like, I don't know how a Quaker meeting. I think well, I know I do. I think everyone don't they? I think they sit together quietly and just kind of wait for the Spirit to move somebody. And sometimes the
Yeah,
Spirit moves somebody, and sometimes the Spirit doesn't move anybody. But it's in the context of silence.
silence.
Um,
I think it's good. I think it's important.
I think it's something worth exploring. Of being silent together.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, just when you mentioned it in terms of a therapy session, right? Or we could talk about it in terms of even I don't think churches practice it enough. We the last church I was at, we had intentional silence as part of our worship, as part of our liturgy, and I really appreciated that. I think that it is a key. I think it is a key aspect of being together that we just don't use these days, that we don't call upon in our social situations.
I think I'm taking sort of a ambiguous stance on that one, where I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
About whether or not it would be productive being silent together. Like, what would being silent together be productive of? I'm definitely sold on being silent by myself. Um, I'm sold on that one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. It's as far as like Western practices or traditions that are. I think it's the
Where
Carthusian. Yeah, just where there have been clear examples of like the practice of silence. Rarely, I think, as my struggle is, I think like that's like moments of silence. Like when I just mentioned that because I was like, we're talking about silence. Like I'm not sure where that comes from.
Yeah.
And in
Well,
generally in corporate worship, historically, there's not there I can't think off the top of my head an old historical tradition in the East or West that and like the Christian East and the Christian West where there's liturgical silence, like where that is the work of the people. Now I can think of like individual
like a monastic thing.
Well, no, I mean the use and practice of silence within monasteries and by particular monks. Now that is a thing. The Carthusians, I think it's the Carthusians that are a silent Roman Catholic order, and they're people that will take you hear about it, vows of silence. I'm going to be silent. Yeah, because the tongue is a tricky thing. You know, The Apostle James reminds us of this in his epistle. But yeah, the corporate use of silence, like being silent together, I don't know.
I think that would be something worth pursuing, for myself, is looking at what is the tradition of silence in the church. Because I do believe obviously there is in monasteries, not just personal silence, but they would take days where they would do everything together in silence,
I think, well, most of the time that I can recall, like there are particular, and this is more of a Roman Catholic thing, where you do have like different orders. In other words, like different approaches to the monastic life that get a cool name, like Carthusians or Franciscans, Benedictines, whatever. It's a Roman Catholic thing. You don't really see that in the Christian East, and you really don't see it in even non-Christian monastic traditions. At least not on that kind of ordered and structured kind of way. I think I'm going out on a limb there.
Well, it seems to me that the Buddhist monks seem to be quite silent in at least.
They are
right, and they're gathering together quite.
But there's also chanting and bell ringing. There's diversity and variations, and actually Buddhism is extremely diverse. So I don't know. I'm gonna keep an open mind, but I'm gonna just say I don't know. As I'm just sitting here thinking about it, like now, I think if you're able to be like quiet and silent with somebody, it's certainly, I know there's a level of intimacy there. Like to be intentionally quiet with somebody, like to just sit on the porch and be quiet. It's not like riding down riding in a subway or on a bus with somebody you don't know and you're just quiet. I think that's a little different.
I think for those of us that are extrovert, is particularly, it's even hard in those cases. For me, somebody as extrovert as me, it is difficult to be silent even in those cases. I'm like, oh man, this person's not even talking to me. Do they hate me?
Are they judging me again?
Are they judging? But it's true. When I think about the people that I can be silent with without mentioning it, let's say, just accidentally enter into a time of silence together.
Yeah. You don't start off like, hey, how you doing? How about we be quiet? How about we be silent together for the next 5 minutes?
How weird would that be? I mean, that's an SNL skit, right? Of introducing some weirdo.
Let's just sit here quietly together. What do you think about that? Can we agree on that? How about we start now?
But is that a modern Western phenomenon?
I'm so far into that fishbowl, I couldn't tell you.
Well, I kind of want to. That behooves me to look deeper, to check it out, because it does seem to be a particularly Western and particularly American thing to be sort of anti-silence, to fill silence
or to be uncomfortable with it. Yeah, to feel like there needs to be. Well, I mean, this is how we know it's true. Like go to any place where there's shopping, and
Music.
and there's gonna be music in the background,
Mhm.
the white noise, so to speak, or not so white noise. Yeah, it's in there. It's
Well, yeah, and they've done studies that show that people are much more likely to buy if there's music playing.
oh,
It's a psychological marketing effect.
I have to look in that one.
Yeah. So, and again, I think it comes back to pleasure. You know, it's like it's
I
that
think
positive reinforcement, right? Like I'm doing
well, I
this,
mean, it
feeling
could
good.
be. Yeah, I mean, I think that no, there is something positively reinforcing about it that keeps us doing it.
Yeah,
But that's what I wonder about, like the people that I've had just some conversations with about silence that are kind of challenged by silence.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, the things that be that drive silence away are really just a type of avoidance, um,
Mm,
which is like I want the pain to go away.
right.
I don't want to deal with this annoying thing in my mind.
Well, I think
And it's reinforcing.
there's a there's something about that I was thinking about recently with trauma. We have there's just somebody I know that can't stay still and hates silence, kind of like what you're talking about. And I know there's a good deal, I'm so I know that there's a good deal of trauma in their background, and there has to be. I was thinking about this today. There has to be a direct link between trauma and the inability to be silent, and and vice versa. I think there's probably a great link between silence and facing certain things in silence and in acclimating to silence and the healing of trauma.
It probably won't hurt. Silence. It could be healing, right?
Yeah.
It could be a part of the healing, or it could be a good indicator of healing having occurred. Um, yeah. Hmm.
Well, and the last thing I'd like to talk about, getting back to the creativity aspect of it.
Hmm.
I don't know, like we can continue to talk about the trauma aspect of it, but the creativity aspect is something that it's hard to teach my kids, and it's been hard for me to learn, and that is that boredom and ultimately silence, or maybe silence ultimately boredom, is a perfect breeding ground for creativity, because instead of being amused, in which we turn off our thinking and receive,
Hmm.
we are forced to think for ourselves and create things to stimulate ourselves, right?
Hmm.
And to build. And it's what is it? Uh, what is it? Survival is the mother of all invention, or something like that. Necessity is the mother of all
Yeah,
invention.
necessity. Yeah.
And
Or,
silence creates a certain necessity.
yeah, and so does boredom, right? Like the
Yeah.
antidote to boredom. We're thrust on our own resources. Yeah, we have to engage with a muse. Since the big amused, it's um,
Is that
we're
where so
I don't
amused?
know, but I'm going to play with the word there just for
Yeah, I
fun.
like that. I like that.
And then the hard thing is, like, I think there's a place for like relaxing, and
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
um, but there's also a place to you use the whole of our faculties without them being distracted and given time and space to like work out things on their own, because there's so much that the reality is that like what's in our conscious thought is only a part of what's getting worked around in there. So it's like, still computing. But no, it's and that's where the imagination comes into play, right? I mean, like if I'm constantly being bombarded with somebody else's muse, somebody else's imagination, which is sometimes very great because there's a lot of good stuff, brilliant things being created, and on the other hand, it's like maybe I can come up with something brilliant if I would just give myself the space and time to do it.
We have to be our own muse, right? We're forced to be our own muse.
To listen. I mean, and to be guided and to let it develop and to let it begin to actually develop.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's an aspect of prophecy in this, right? In the sense that the prophetic is being able to see. I mean, it's future, but being able to be privy to what is really going on, right?
I think that kind of goes back to you were mentioning something like it's like, how do you give room for the spirit to work?
Yeah.
How do you collaborate, cooperate? Where's the synergy here?
Mm-hmm.
If it's going to be anywhere, I think it is in the silence and it is in the solitude, and at the same time, maybe on the spur of the moment. It's kind of, Jesus' instructions of like, don't do a whole lot of sermon prep. The Spirit will lead you. It's all right.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's like Jacob wrestling with God kind of stuff, where wrestling with the angel, you're going to bless me. And I guess when you mentioned prophecy, I guess I kind of lean more towards the like forthtelling of prophecy, more as like the general mode of prophesying. Like let's discern, what God's doing in this moment, as opposed to what God's calling us to do in this moment, as opposed to foretelling, like what is God going what's going to, I'm going to be divinely revealed something about what's going to happen in the future. I'm certainly open to the latter. My experience has been more in the former.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, like, I'm just trying to, like, where else would you kind of be receptive to, or how other way would you be receptive to, holding an image? I mean, I'm just trying to think of like, well, if God was going to tell me what was going to happen in the future, what would that even be like? Yeah. I mean, it would either be in the form like most apocalyptic, like literature and scripture. And I'm just, even like in the Book of Acts, it's more visionary. It's like image based. Was it Agabus? It's Paul there in the Book of Acts, and he takes the belt out, and he's like, "You're gonna." It's dramatic. It's symbolic. It's image based, as opposed to necessarily like didactic and language based.
It's more descriptive than prescriptive, right?
Well, I mean, it's communication in an image based form.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
as opposed to
Almost dreamlike, right?
almost, actually not almost dreamlike,
It's mostly dreamlike.
mostly dreamlike, as opposed to now write this paragraph very quickly. I have an address for you.
Yeah.
Like write this address
Time
down.
and place.
Yeah. Meet at this intersection tomorrow at 3.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be what's described in scripture, and most people's descriptions of that kind of experience tends to be more image based, ambiguous. And as I say ambiguous because it's not.
It could be either or, right? It's hard to. It's vague and.
Here's a picture, and interpret the picture.
Right. Well, Scott's watching, and
Hey, Scott.
he said, "When I'm painting, I enjoy listening to music. However, when I'm earlier in the process, developing the composition, doing foundational sketches and studies, silence
and a glass of wine.
Glass of wine is best." Interesting. Yeah. There are. I actually thought about that today, Scott. I was thinking about art, and I was thinking about discussions we've had, and we're going to have this coming up Monday. We're going to have another discussion on art.
Be there, be square.
Be there, be square. Monday night, 9:00 here. Same bat time, same bat. Anyways, the aspect of listening to music, the tendency I have to enjoy art with music. There's something I don't know. There's a synergy there between creativity, but I think you're right. Sort of what we were talking about is, I think once we're in the process of creating, I think the silence is no longer necessary, right? Like I think what we're talking about is that the lack of silence can strangle creativity, right? That the lack of stillness,
Sure.
or what do you call it? Quiet. The lack of quiet,
solitude. I mean, I think solitude and silence is probably quiet. That's the thing. Like quiet is sort of. Yeah, I guess
it's more descriptive.
The quiet, man. No, quiet. I think you're right. No, quiet is probably a good word because we're never really in absolute silence. But to place ourselves in quiet, to have some solitude, that maybe we're silent in the sense of we're not talking all the time. Yeah, and going back to what you started off with is like, what is its role in development? I think as a practice, like it's a space that's necessary in order to develop. Generally speaking, and what I think culturally the question becomes like, do people get enough of it in order to develop? I don't know. It leaves me wondering.
Well, I'll tell you this. My children are very good at sitting quietly. And I attribute that to one, my wife being a very introvert and quiet person, but two, to a solid effort I put in their raising to have times of sitting and practicing silence. Like it was just very important for me, for my children and me and my whole family and my wife, to practice silence, and not necessarily together, though we did do that, but just that being intentional about silence. I think it's sort of being very influenced by. Did you ever read the Spirit of the Disciplines by who wrote that? Can't remember.
It's either Dallas Willard or Foster.
Well, I think they both wrote a good book
A
that
very similar-
that I was very
similar title.
influenced by. Yeah.
Um,
Foster was the one I was thinking of, though. Yeah.
yeah. Um,
But I was thinking, at the time I was obsessed with this idea of discipline. Not disciplining your kids type discipline, but teaching your kids to be disciplined.
yeah, to develop a discipline or to be
Develop
yeah,
a discipline.
yeah, or to
disciplines.
be disciplined.
Yeah.
To be teachable. To be
And so that's what
persistent.
I think. I think that, I mean, just from my experience, I do think that there is some healthy, healthy. There's some health to be derived from practicing silence.
Mhm. It makes me want to dig into it a little bit more.
Yeah, me too. We'll come back to it. Let's dig into it. Come
we'll
back
have to
to
dig into it and roll back around. See what
Yeah.
we come up with. I mean,
Yeah.
see what other information and data is out there on it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we have reached a decent. Oh, we got a thumbs up from Scott. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Scott.
it.
The pre-appointed time for us to go practice some.
It's there is a arbitrary thing that we say an hour, but I think we reached sort of the end of our discussion, and unless you have anything that's come up that you think of, or somebody in the comment section has something they'd like to add, I think we'll call it a night.
We'll just have to start it again next week if the Lord's willing
Yeah.
and the creek don't rise.